Hello, my dearest friends, my dearest beautiful co-creator souls of love and light. This is Nanari, Princess of the Sea, coming to you with a new video. I know it's been some time since I've done a video, and really this period of time has been some deep introspection as well as things I've been going through, and this is what I wish to share with you in this video. I titled this video Lightworker Relationships because I've come into some deep realizations about my path. And the Buddha used to share from his experiences, and this is why I have done the videos that I do, is to share from my experience so as to help benefit you the same way Buddha did such. Now, for those of you who have been following me on my Facebook, you know that recently I went through a very deep, heart-centered connection with a near twin soul. And it was in that breakup that really brought to light some deeper things for me. My last videos on YouTube and on Facebook were centered around God-centered relationships, was centered around the path with my twin soul and how I had let go of that aspect and was moving on. And because I didn't resonate necessarily with the light worker path that he was wanting of a light worker relationship. And I'm here to share with you that I do understand it now. And this is what I want to share with you. For the last 4 years in particular, 4 years ago now, I made the choice to kind of start moving on from my twin soul, even though, we were connected, we were still, together as a twin soul union, so to speak. I had chosen to move on and have other relationships because he wasn't interested, my twin soul wasn't interested in being with me, and he kept telling me, I don't want a couple relationship. And I was grasping, trying to understand what that really meant. And so I had a couple of connections, a gentleman that I lived with for 6 weeks, and it was an intense soul connection, but he was more a soulmate. And from the beginning, when he and I first connected, it was really about, and I told him I wasn't going to be with him for a long time. It was about me helping him to open his heart. And I knew that. And I had a couple of other connections with men over the last 4 years, but really just, in passing. It wasn't like very serious. And it wasn't until this most recent relationship that was very intense with my near twin that really brought to light some really beautiful realizations. And so for the last 2 years in particular, since certain things happened to me, and for those of you who have been following my journey, you know what that is. I'm not going to go into details here. But I've kind of felt like I have not been living the timeline that I was meant to live. And I've often said that in the last couple of years to my twin soul. And I've also said recently to a dear friend of mine that I kind of felt like Groundhog Day, since we just passed Imbolc or Candlemas and also Groundhog Day. I've kind of felt like the movie Groundhog Day, if you've ever seen it, where he goes round and round and replays the same day over and over again. And I felt in some ways that my life was like that, just my life in general, and then particularly in relationships, the brief connections that I had in passing, nothing very intimate and serious, yet this most recent one even, I kept coming round circle again in Groundhog Day back to my twin soul. And I kept wondering, yeah, okay, I understand there's a deep heart-soul connection there, with my twin soul. It's never going to die. It's, infinite and all of that. But there was something that kept bugging me in this whole thing about light worker relationships. What the heck does he mean he wants to be light workers? Because to me, being light workers meant who I am as a light worker on this planet individually, and then also who I work with on a daily basis. Like for instance, I'm going to be on the air coming up here this Tuesday with a very dear friend and light worker, Christopher Rayburn. And so he and I, work together. I'm on his show, we do certain things together and whatever. And so we don't have a relationship in terms of, like a deep love, like what we would consider from an earthly perspective as a romantic couple relationship. I don't have any of those feelings, and he's married to his husband and whatnot. So for me, that's what a light worker relationship is. And I could never seem to grasp what it was exactly that my twin soul was getting at. Yet it was a deeper relationship that I was searching for. And not even searching for, that I am, and I was living, and I was being, and I knew I couldn't be with just any man. I knew I couldn't be with just anyone, and I couldn't just hook up with somebody to hook up with them, because I can't go back to that earthly type relationship. And so I've been struggling all these years, and in fact, almost 6 years ago, I stood on the driveway of my twin soul's place when he had invited me to his satsang at his place that night in July of 2010, and I even told him, look, I cannot be just light workers with you. And I remember seeing the deep hurt in his eyes, and it's something that's embedded in my heart that I would never forget. And I still just couldn't grasp what he was getting at. Yet I've come to understand he and I were talking the same language. We were just kind of saying it in a different way. Because over the years, I've had all these writings and journalings and channelings that have been coming through me about God-centered relationships and how it's about seeing the God in each other and how you grow together and you're living together from that space. And so it wasn't until I came into my near twin soul, my near twin, and had this relationship that I really came to understand. And so I want to thank him for our connection. There were circumstances, and I'm not going to go into the details of it for his privacy and mine, but there were circumstances that had him not be able to fully be with me. And there were times during our relationship when he would constantly say to me things like, I hope, I'm able to satisfy you, and I feel bad that I cannot give you what you want, and I hope what I'm giving you is enough. And he was referring to sex, and we were very intimate. We did, like my relationship with Steve, my original twin soul, we were very intimate, yet we never consummated our relationship in the sense of having intercourse. So this gentleman, who is my near twin, and we did the same. And we had a very, very deep, intimate love. And that intimate love is still there. I will always feel that for him, and I know he'll always feel it for me. It's just there were certain circumstances that were in his life at present that made it so that he can't be with me fully. But he kept saying those things to me, and I kept trying to explain to him. I would tell him, look, you don't get it. You don't understand. It's not about the sex for me. I got more enjoyment from the times that he would come over here after he would drop his teenage boys off at school, and he would just come over here and cuddle with me, and we would lay in bed together, and yeah, we'd be intimate and we would do stuff, but it was never about intercourse. We would kiss, we were, intimate in other ways. And that is what I was longing for. Because as my twin soul did a Marmot video that has 27,000 views on it, because it went viral on Facebook at the time we, got it out there. We all want to be held. We all want to be loved. We all want to know that we matter. And we all want that closeness and that intimacy and connection, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with sex. And for me, it's not about the intercourse, it's about the tantra, because there were times when this near twin and I would have this connection to where it was a tantric lovemaking, to where we weren't having intercourse, but we were like making love without body parts. And that may be hard to understand for some, but it was very soulful and very intimate and very loving and very deep, in a deep, deep love. And I was talking with a dear, dear friend of mine who I've mentored off and on, and we're also very close. She's like my best friend, a soul sister to me. And I was talking with her just recently, and she was talking about how she's just reunited again with her twin soul, and they have been apart for the last 3 years. And one of the things that used to bother her was that he started doing it now recently, is he comes after her like sexually, telling her what he wants to do to her sexually, and coming on to her sexually. And while I never really did that a lot with my twin soul, I did it very rarely. That was something that bothered him. And I couldn't grasp that and couldn't understand that until my dear friend was telling me about this. And we're later on in life, she and I were, in menopause. And so it's not about, and she was saying how it bothered her and irritated her so much about the whole issue of him coming at her sexually all the time. It was like he was objectifying her and degrading her, and not really spending time with her intimately to get to know her as a human being. And this is what she has said that she values so much in our relationship, my twin soul and I. We have that deep intimacy and that deep connection on so many other levels, spiritually, emotionally, etherically, energetically, and even physically when we've been together. It's not, again, been about sex. It's been about a tantra and a tantric lovemaking where we're making love to our heart and our soul. Like, he'll write a song for me and pour his whole heart out into it. Or he'll like a video on Facebook or on YouTube. He'll like a video on YouTube and he's sending me a message to touch my heart and my soul. Or I'll create a video of his music for him and send it to him as my gift of love. Or I'll uplift him and inspire him, and he's considering doing the gig in a few months, and I'll give him inspiration about, that gig. Those ways where we make love to our heart and our soul, that's like beyond. It's that intimacy of touching one another without touching one another. And that is what my twin soul was getting at. And so as I was listening to my friend talk about, her twin soul and how she was just so irritated about the fact that he was coming on to her sexually. It was like between that and this recent relationship that I had with my near twin, I was just like, you know what? Thank you. I so appreciate it. I so get it. And then I was thinking about Gandhi. Gandhi's path, he married, he had a wife, he had, I believe it was 4 children, and then he took a vow of chastity and devoted his life to the mission and purpose of helping to free India. And his wife then joined him in that vow of chastity. Now, that's not to say that they weren't affectionate and they weren't loving and they weren't deeply. In fact, I was reading in some research recently about how more deeply in love they were without the sex component in it. And I really came to understand, that Gandhi and his wife, they were still intimate. They still slept in the same bed together. They still slept together naked. They still held one another. They still caressed one another. They still gave love in that way. But it wasn't about an objectifying sex. And that's where I've been coming from all these 8 years with my twin soul. But I don't think he understood that. And I don't think he understood when I would come over to his place to see him. He thought it was I was coming at him for sex. But it was never about that. It was I wanted that, what the Marmots have. About being held and being loved and being cherished. And so even after Gandhi's wife had crossed over, he still had connections with other women. But he never had sex with them. He would sleep in bed with them. And see, it was often taken out of context as if he was being some dirty old man or, had some sort of obsession with being with other women that way. No, it was actually very sacred what he was doing because he took that vow of chastity. And I came to understand that what my twin soul saw of me coming to him in the ways that I did at certain points was a cheapening of our love. Because he thought I was coming at him for sex or coming to get him, somehow, or to claim him, or, some sort of thing like that, which was never really my aim. I was longing for that physical intimacy of just being held and being loved and knowing that I mattered to him. And also that soulful, intimate connection that we have, making love to our heart and soul together in those ways. And so we very much have that one side, but we didn't have the physical so much. And he kept me at a distance, and he would say he would block me. And he didn't want a couple relationship because of it. And he feels that a couple relationship is that, where it's cheapened or it's lessened by having the sex. And so some light workers may choose to still have tantric lovemaking like I did with my near twin, and not necessarily have intercourse. There were other ways that he satisfied me in that realm, sensually and tantrically. And I'm grateful to him for that. And I kept trying to explain to him, you don't understand. That's not what I'm looking for. And that was one of the reasons that it was so hard for our breakup. Because we were that intimate and we were that close. And so I came into this enlightenment of understanding what a light worker relationship is. Now, some people may term it, the twin soul union, the heart-centered connection, divine partnership, divine union. There's many names for this, but what feels right and feels most comfortable for my twin soul and I is the light worker relationship. Where it's not where I'm light workers just with everybody, but we're in a very deep, intimate love. And it's a love of making love to our heart and our soul in that deep intimacy. And then when we are physically together, it's not about objectifying each other in sex. It's about honoring the God within each other. Where we can lay with one another just naked and not have to merge our physical, sexual organs. And if it did happen, then it would be a sacred tantric act. And it wouldn't be something that is objectifying. It would be heart-centered. It would be soul-based. It wouldn't be for getting off purposes. And so it brings me back full circle to what I had originally with my original twin soul who was killed, Steve. He and I were very intimate and very close, and our love was very deep, and we never consummated our relationship by having that sexual act. We didn't cheapen it. We didn't lessen it. And that's not to say that love making in that tantric, sacred, holy way is somehow bad. I'm not saying that. It's a very beautiful act when you are doing it from that place of sacred holiness. In a tantric way that's not about orgasms and getting off and taking your own pleasure or trying to please the other one that you're with. When you're giving that as an act of giving to God, it's a very sacred act. My twin soul and I are choosing to be in a light worker relationship with a vow of chastity, to focus on the mission and purpose that we have as light workers together in a very deep love, much like Michael and Ricky Beckwith, without the tantric lovemaking in the sense of the sex act. We're here to bring the music and the message of the love to the world in a very deep and soulful way. And Gandhi did that with his wife. And that actually is the enlightenment, the Buddha path. You know that most of my videos have centered upon the middle path, the Buddha way, the balance, especially since I am in my last life, and my twin soul is as well. And when I came together with my near twin in this most recent relationship, I knew I was so very close to this. And so this is the path of the middle path that Buddha spoke of. Because we go from one extreme to the other. We either have many, many lives in which we're promiscuous and we just have sex for procreation, or we have sex just to have sex, to get off, for personal gratification and our own self-fulfillment. And then we have the other extreme where we go and we be a nun or a monk. And I did that because after this breakup with my near twin, I was just like, oh, that's it. Forget it. Forget relationships. Forget all of this. I'm just going to go back to being a nun. Because I started on that path like Buddha did. He had all the luxuries and everything. And then he went and was the ascetic, denying himself of everything. And so I went and lived that path. I had everything. When I was married, I, had all the money because, my ex-husband, my former husband, was making $250,000 a year, and I had the big house and I had the big cars, and, he and I had sex, and, we had, our 3 beautiful children who I love dearly, the grown beautiful men they are. And, we had all this stuff, and I was like in the luxury like Buddha was. And then there came a point in time, there was something that happened 20 years ago, before the birth of my middle son. And I won't go into the details here, but it was one of the steps that caused me to start on the path of being an ascetic, of being a nun. And then a few years after that, just a couple of years after that, I think it was about maybe 4 years after that, I had my daughter and lost her. For those of you who know, my daughter, Caitlin Rose, Caitlin means pure and Rose means love. So it's pure love. And that's why I chose that name for her. I was 5.5 months pregnant with her, and she died in my womb. And I had to give birth to her stillborn, and I chose to bury her in my backyard. And I ended up doing this alone because my former husband was really nowhere to be found. He would work 80 to 90 hours a week, and even when he was there, he wasn't there. So he wasn't there physically, and he wasn't there for me. Yet it broke his heart when it happened, and that was the catalyst to the end of my marriage back all those years ago. And the reason for that was I started down the path of being an ascetic. I didn't want to have sex anymore. And what it really was is I didn't want to have sex in the sense of the other extreme, like the promiscuity. Not that I was ever promiscuous in this life. I had other lives in which I was a prostitute and did the promiscuous thing and had many lovers and what have you. I mean, I could count on one hand plus 2 how many lovers I've had in my entire life. Middle-aged as I am, a little bit past middle-aged. But that said, I wasn't promiscuous, but I took sex not from a holy way. I didn't see it from a tantra. Even though I was teaching tantra in a lot of ways in my marriage, I wasn't living that, mainly because my former husband wasn't at all interested in it. He was not spiritual in that sense at all. And so I hid in the closet spiritually with a lot of things, that being one of them. But when I lost my daughter, I did not want to have sex anymore. And so it was very hard for my former husband, God love him, to understand. I became that nun. I just lived for God. I was doing the spiritual work. I came out of the spiritual closet at that time. I went through the walking process at that time. I went through this whole spiritual reawakening, and I came out of the spiritual closet and started doing my work fully and concentrating just only on the spiritual work. And I was completely a nun. And my former husband, coming from his background of being a Reformed Jew, and the whole marriage thing to him was I wasn't doing my wifely duties by having sex with him. I wasn't doing my wifely duties by, being, as the saying goes, barefoot and pregnant, being the housewife, the stay-at-home mom, and, as our children were getting older at that point. And I was not, performing my wifely duties, but I turned to God. So I went to the other extreme of being an ascetic, like Buddha. And then when I came into my twin soul 8 years ago, he opened my heart to that path of, oh my God, I've hid all this love, and all this love just came pouring out of me. And when he would say I was his princess and we were lovers, and I took it more in a romantic sense. Yet I also took it as that deeper Lightworker relationship love. But I was struggling in this samsara of going around and around in this wheel of trying to figure out how to balance the two. I didn't get it. So I kept going from one extreme to another in relationship with him. And he was standing there in that presence that whole time. And God love him. I so appreciate him. Until I got it. And he would call me delusional and crazy and things like that. And it used to anger me because I was just like, no, I'm not delusional. I get it. It's a Michael and Ricky Beckwith type of union. And I wrote all these things about what that union meant and that God-centered relationship. Yet I couldn't fit the pieces of the puzzle completely together until just recently. So I get it now. Now, for those of you who are on the path, you may choose a Lightworker relationship or a heart connection, twin soul union, or near twin, or a soulmate connection that's very deep and heart-centered, to where you do tantrically make love. I just invite you to be free from objectifying sex and making it sex and making it about getting off and an orgasm and that being the goal, and you got to hit the G-spot and, you know, all this stuff. If you're going to tantrically make love, then make it a sacred and holy act. And if you choose, like my twin soul and I at this present moment, to be in a Lightworker relationship in which you take the vow of chastity and focus on the love and light of bringing the music and the message to the world as we are, then I honor you for that choice too. And wherever in between, just remember that as the marmots, we all need to be loved, to be held, to be cherished, to be touched. I just posted last night, for those of you who are on my Facebook. If you're not, you can see it, it's public. My dear friend, Richard, who's at home in K-Town, Kelowna, British Columbia, he posted this story about a man who was on a bus, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't remember the whole story in its entirety. But he talks about there was this man who, I think he was alcoholic or a drug abuser or whatever, and he was on this bus, and he was like freaking out and just having this whole entire, you know, freak out moment where he was, he couldn't, you know, like handle things on the bus. And this woman just came over and touched him. And pardon if you hear my cell phone go off. That's my ringtone. That's actually the song that my twin soul made for me, Princess Upon the Shore. In making love to my heart and my soul, and poured his heart into it. And I absolutely love it. So it's my ringtone on my cell phone, letting me know I have a notification. It may even be him that texted me as I'm recording this. But back to this story. So she just, this old 70-year-old woman who was sitting on the bus just came over and touched this gentleman's hand and just held it tightly until he calmed down. And later someone, I guess, asked, you know, well, why did you do that? And she said he just needed to be touched. He needed to know someone cared. That's what we require for the path that we need. Just like the marmots do, as my twin soul talked about in his video. And I call us twin souls because we share the same soul. You know, people who have watched my videos here on YouTube and on Facebook. So you know what I mean when I say the twin soul path. So my twin soul and I are in union. And there will be times when we will see each other physically. Yet it's not going to be about objectifying one another or sex. And if we ever do come to a point where we do marry, and he does bring me home, because I miss home so much, and I miss Canada. I miss Vernon. I miss all of you who are watching this video, who are at home. I miss you all deeply and dearly. It may be with a vow of chastity that we take on that marriage, but it doesn't in any way lessen our love. It actually deepens our love, because you can see an intimacy and be in intimacy at that middle path. Because Buddha used to talk about, in sharing his own experiences from his heart, he disowned both extremes that he lived. He lived both extremes, and then he disowned them. And he talked about the middle path of tuning a guitar. That if you tune the strings too tightly, boing, the string bursts, right? And then you can't play. And then if you leave it too loose, it doesn't play. To be that harmony and melody of life, you still have desires to be held and to be touched. Yet it doesn't override it in such extreme that you become promiscuous and you make it be all about sex. And then you don't go the other way of being a nun either, to where you renounce it. You remember what's in your heart, what my twin soul opened me up to 8 years ago, of that deep heart-centered connection, the Lightworker relationship. Buddha said, change is never painful. Resistance to change is painful. Ergo, it seems I was resistant to this change. Not purposefully. I didn't know any better. I was struggling to understand that balance, just like Buddha did. He struggled for all those years too. I can now say I'm at peace, and how very much in soulful love I am with my twin soul, and he me, and how we are light workers. We're not a couple. We're not in a couple relationship. We're not in a romantic, earthly couple relationship. We're in a light worker relationship, in a very deep heart and soul-centered love. And I am deeply honored to be that with you, my twin soul. I love you deeply. And I love you all. And thank you for allowing me to share. And may this touch your heart and your soul and bring you into a deeper essence of love. Because this is the new paradigm of this earth, this new earth. This is what the template of relationships are meant to be. Real relationships. May this bless you in love. Spada.